The August sun beat down on the jagged spines of Blackstone Ridge, casting long shadows across the rust-colored rock formations and sun-bleached sagebrush that dotted the landscape. The air shimmered with heat, dry as bone, and still. Nothing stirred, save for the occasional circling hawk riding invisible thermals high above the canyon walls. Forest Ranger Ethan Cole sat astride his battered ATV, scanning the dusty trail ahead. His face was lined from years of sun and wind, a permanent tan etched into his skin like weathered leather. Beneath the brim of his ranger hat, his dark eyes narrowed, sharp and alert. 10 years of patrolling the unforgiving terrain of northern Arizona had made him part of the land, silent, steady, and watchful. He adjusted the strap of his pack and glanced at the GPS clipped to his vest. The signal was faint, but enough. Just west of his position lay Silver Spring, one of the few reliable water sources left in this stretch of wilderness, and, according to recent sightings, the last place anyone had reported seeing the elusive Mustang herd led by a ghost gray stallion known only as Phantom. Ethan didn't believe in legends, but he did believe in signs, and the tracks he'd been following since dawn were fresh. He leaned forward and pressed the radio button on his shoulder. "Cole to base. I'm heading north-northwest into Sector 9, following up on potential movement near Silver Spring. No signs of poachers, but I'll check back in by 1800. The radio crackled. "Copy that, Ethan," came the voice of Chief Ranger Nora Brennan. "Weather's clear, but temps'll drop hard tonight. Don't push it." He smirked slightly. "Wouldn't dream of it. Cole out." The ride to the overlook was steep and winding, the trail narrowing until he had to abandon the ATV and proceed on foot. The sun was merciless, beating down on his back as he climbed, boots crunching against loose shale and sand. With every step, the world below opened up wider, ridges folding into canyons, canyons bleeding into valleys. And there, in the far distance, a flicker of movement near the spring. Ethan dropped to one knee, pulled the binoculars from his vest, and lifted them to his eyes. His breath caught. There they were. 15, maybe 20 Mustangs clustered near the water, coats gleaming in the sunlight, tails flicking lazily. And standing slightly apart, powerful and poised, was a stallion so striking it seemed unreal. Dappled gray, silver mane catching the light like river water. "Phantom." "You're real," Ethan whispered. He shifted to get a better angle, his camera already in hand. But the moment his boot met the edge of the overlook, the rock beneath him gave way. The fall happened fast and violent. He dropped like a stone, tumbling down the slope. He hit once, twice, his leg twisted beneath him with a sickening crunch. His head struck a boulder. Then everything went black. A stillness settled over the ridge. Dust floated lazily in the air where Ethan had disappeared. Below, by the spring, Phantom's head snapped up. His ears twitched toward the sound of falling rock. He sniffed the wind, eyes scanning the ridgeline. The herd stirred nervously behind him, shifting on their hooves, sensing danger. But Phantom didn't flee. Instead, he stepped forward, slowly, deliberately, toward the origin of the sound. Ethan didn't know how long he was out. When his eyes finally blinked open, the sky above had softened, the searing sun giving way to pale evening light. Pain radiated from his left leg, a throbbing pulse that turned his stomach. His mouth was bone dry. He tried to sit up but collapsed with a groan. His hand instinctively reached for the radio, gone. He spotted the shattered remains of it 10 feet away. He closed his eyes, took shallow breaths, and then something odd. A noise, not human, not threatening. Hooves. He turned his head and froze. Surrounding him in a wide, loose semicircle were horses. Wild Mustangs. Their eyes locked on him, ears forward, nostrils flared. But they didn't bolt, they didn't charge. They simply stood, statuesque and alert. At the center, closer than the rest, stood Phantom. Bigger than Ethan imagined. Smarter, too. There was a knowing in his gaze that made the ranger's blood run cold. "I must be hallucinating," Ethan murmured. "There's no way." He tried to move, pain flaring in white-hot streaks down his leg and into his skull. He groaned and let his head fall back against the dirt. Then one of the horses stepped forward. It was a chestnut mare with a white blaze down her face. Her movements were cautious but unafraid. She approached Ethan's prone form and lowered her head, sniffing his face. Her breath was warm, her eyes dark and curious. Then, without warning, she turned and trotted a short distance away. Ethan watched through half-lidded eyes as she dipped her muzzle into a shallow depression in the ground, a tiny pool of spring water. She drank, then returned to him, water dripping from her mouth. Drops fell onto his face, into his cracked lips. "You're kidding me," he whispered. She did it again, then again. Ethan's thoughts were scrambled, but one thing was clear. This horse was helping him. Not out of instinct, not out of curiosity, but with intention. Phantom remained still, a sentinel on the edge of the group. The rest of the herd fidgeted occasionally, but none fled. They were waiting, watching. As the sun dipped below the ridgeline, the temperature dropped sharply. The heat of the day vanished, replaced by creeping cold. Ethan shivered. Every inch of his body ached. He knew he wouldn't last the night. But the horses, they didn't leave. One by one, they began to lie down, forming a loose ring around Ethan's broken body. The chestnut mare curled close to his left side, her warmth radiating through his soaked clothes. Phantom moved last, lying just beyond Ethan's right shoulder, his large body blocking the wind that had begun to howl through the rocks. This isn't real," Ethan whispered, eyes fluttering shut. But it was. The first fat drops of rain began to fall. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Ethan, half-conscious, turned his face toward Phantom and whispered into the night, "You're not just wild, are you?" Then darkness claimed him again. This time, not alone. The morning light crept slowly over Blackstone Ridge, spilling soft gold over the jagged peaks and valleys. Fog clung to the lowlands, and the scent of damp earth filled the air. A hawk cried out overhead, circling once before disappearing into the mist. Ethan Cole stirred beneath a thin veil of dust and pine needles. His body was stiff, heavy with cold and pain. He blinked up at the sky, disoriented. For a moment, he thought it had all been a dream. The fall, the Mustangs, the chestnut mare, the phantom-like stallion. But when he shifted, a sharp jolt of pain radiated from his leg, and the truth settled in like a stone in his gut. He turned his head. They were still there. The horses stood in a wide crescent just beyond him, ears twitching, breath rising in soft clouds. Phantom was closest now, his silver coat gleaming faintly in the morning light. His eyes were locked on Ethan, unreadable, wild but familiar. Ethan's throat was dry, his lips cracked. "Still here?" he rasped, unsure if he was talking to the horse or himself. He tried to sit up, and this time, with a grunt and a stab of agony through his left leg, he managed it. The world swayed. He braced himself with one hand and looked down. His leg was bad, swollen, purple, obviously broken. No splint, no radio, no cell signal, and the nearest ranger station was at least 8 miles away. He was trapped. Unless... Ethan looked again at the herd. They weren't just loitering, they were guarding him. The chestnut mare stepped forward, just as she had the night before. She lowered her head, nostrils flaring. then flicked her ears back toward the trailhead as if encouraging him to move. Of course, he couldn't. "Yeah," Ethan muttered bitterly, "I'd love to follow you. Just give me a minute to grow a new femur." The mare stamped once, then turned and trotted off into the trees. Phantom let out a low, breathy snort, almost like a warning. Then, surprisingly, he followed her. And so did the rest of the herd. Within seconds, Ethan was alone. The sudden emptiness felt like a punch to the chest. They had stayed through the night, warmed him, watched over him, and now, just as fast, they were gone. He didn't know what he'd expected. They were wild animals after all. Still, something inside him sagged. He looked around, then winced as he tried to shift his weight. He had to get higher. Maybe there'd be a signal up the slope. Gritting his teeth, he dragged himself inch by inch toward a small rise. Every pull sent lightning through his leg, but he didn't stop. Half an hour later, bloody-knuckled and shaking, he reached a spot just beneath a scraggly pine and pulled out his phone. Miraculously, a single bar blinked to life. He opened his emergency app and hit send. Then he passed out. 5 miles away, a rancher named Travis Ellison was feeding his goats when his walkie crackled. "Travis, you copy?" He grabbed it off the fence. "Go ahead." "Dispatch just picked up a distress ping. Ranger Cole. It's flagged as code red." Travis dropped the feed bucket. "He's out near the ridge, ain't he?" "That's right. Last ping came from near Silver Spring." Travis didn't wait for instructions. "I'll saddle Boone and head out. If he's alive, we'll find him." Hours later, Ethan woke to the sound of hooves. He blinked into the light, softer now, filtered through afternoon haze, and saw Phantom standing just 10 feet away, looking at him like he'd never left. The stallion's ears flicked, and behind him, the rest of the herd began to emerge from the trees. The chestnut mare came forward again, this time with a curious addition. She was dragging something in her mouth. At first, Ethan thought it was rope, but then he recognized it. A torn piece of canvas, like from an old tent or saddlebag. She dropped it near Ethan's hand. "What the hell?" he murmured. But before he could make sense of it, the air changed. Distantly, the unmistakable sound of hoofbeats, fast ones, coming closer. Phantom turned, alert, the herd tensed. Then a rider burst through the tree line, Travis Ellison on his roan gelding. Boone, reins pulled tight as he reined in fast. "Ethan!" Travis shouted. "You alive?" "Sort of," Ethan called back, half laughing, half crying from the pain and relief. Travis jumped down and rushed over. "Jesus, you look like hell." "Feel worse," Ethan muttered. "My leg's busted, can't move." As Travis knelt to check the injury, his eyes flicked up and froze. Ethan." Ethan turned his head. The horses hadn't moved. They stood in a loose circle around them. Phantom right at the edge, not spooked, not aggressive, just watching. Travis whistled. "I've seen wild Mustangs run at the scent of a man, but these, they look like they're guarding you." Ethan didn't answer. He couldn't. Travis glanced at him. "You tell me what the hell happened out here." Ethan looked up at the silver stallion. "I don't think I can." By nightfall, a rescue chopper had lifted Ethan from the canyon floor. As the rotors spun and the ground shrank beneath them, he kept his eyes locked on the herd, watching them disappear into the trees. Phantom was the last to go. Still, silent, and impossible to forget. In the hospital later, after surgery and sedation, Ethan would wake from a fever dream calling the horse's name. Nurses exchanged puzzled glances, jotting notes about possible head trauma. But Ethan knew better. He hadn't just been rescued. He'd been chosen. And something inside him had shifted. a quiet sense of purpose rising in his chest like a slow dawn. He owed them his life, and somehow he was going to find a way to repay it. 3 weeks passed. Ethan Cole leaned heavily on a pair of crutches as he stood on the porch of his cabin at the edge of Blackstone Ridge. His leg was encased in a hard cast from thigh to ankle, a constant reminder of how close he'd come to dying out there. The doctors had called it a miracle. Ethan knew better. It wasn't luck that saved him, it was Phantom, and that truth gnawed at him more with each passing day. He watched the tree line just beyond the pasture, eyes searching for movement. Every morning since his return, he stood out here hoping, maybe foolishly, to see the silver stallion again. But the wild Mustangs hadn't returned. "You're obsessed," muttered Nora Brennan, arms crossed as she joined him. The chief ranger had come by with field reports, but her eyes had narrowed the second she saw him staring into the pines. "I owe them," Ethan said simply. Nora sighed. "Look, I get it. I've read your report twice. Hell, it gave me goosebumps. But that stallion's not some forest spirit. He's wild. The moment you stop expecting him to act human, the easier this'll get." Ethan turned toward her. "You weren't there. You didn't see what they did. That mare brought me water. They slept around me like a wall. Phantom kept the others calm. That wasn't instinct, that was—" He paused, struggling for the word. "Deliberate." Nora didn't argue. She just studied him for a long moment. "You know what people are saying, right?" "That I hit my head too hard?" he said dryly. "Among other things." Ethan looked back toward the trees. "I don't care. I need to find them again. Not for some headline or documentary, just I need to understand why they didn't leave me." Nora reached into her coat and pulled out a folded paper. "Then you might want to read this." He opened it and frowned. It was a report from a local rancher, Travis Ellison, about unusual horse behavior near Clearwater Gulch. The herd had been seen again, and not just seen. They'd been spotted surrounding a small coyote den, blocking it off until the cubs escaped. No explanation. Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Phantom?" Travis had mentioned the silver stallion. Definitely him. Without another word, Ethan turned toward the stable. His crutches clanked against the wood as he moved fast as he could, Nora trailing behind. "Whoa, what do you think you're doing?" she barked. "You can't ride with a busted leg." "I'm not riding," Ethan said, throwing open the stable door. "I'm tracking." He wasn't alone. Much to his surprise, Travis showed up at the trailhead just before sunset. Boone, saddled and snorting, ready to ride. "Figured you'd be dumb enough to try," the rancher said. "So I thought I'd be dumb enough to come with you." Ethan managed a grateful smile. "Appreciate it. You shouldn't," Travis grunted. "I've seen what that stallion can do. He moves like smoke. Whole herd follows his lead. You don't find him, he finds you." They set out with Boone, carrying Ethan's gear and Travis' riding point. The trail to Clearwater Gulch was long, winding through cedar groves and sun-bleached rock faces. The sun sank fast, bathing the land in burnt orange. By the time they reached the gulch, night was curling in from the edges of the sky. Crickets had started their song, and the wind had picked up, whispering through the brush. Then Boone stopped. "Hold up," Travis said quietly. Ethan scanned the slope. His heart jumped. A flicker of silver. There, on the ridge, partially hidden behind a rock, Phantom. The stallion stood still as stone, his eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. Around him, shapes moved, the herd, watching from the shadows. But Phantom didn't move. He just stared down at Ethan. Ethan took a shaky step forward. "It's him." Travis held out an arm. "Don't. Let him come to you." Ethan stopped. The air was so still it felt like the earth had stopped breathing. Phantom took one step, then another, down the ridge, closer. His hooves made no sound on the soft dirt. When he was 10 feet away, he stopped. Ethan swallowed. I don't know what this is, why you saved me, but I need to understand. Why me? Phantom blinked slowly. Behind him, the chestnut mare emerged, followed by a younger Mustang, a yearling, jet black, limping. Travis leaned in. That leg's busted. Ethan saw it too. The colt's left front leg was swollen, barely usable. The rest of the herd stood back, nervous. They want help, Ethan whispered. Phantom snorted softly, turning his head just slightly as if urging him forward. Ethan moved slowly, pain flaring in his own leg, and crouched near the yearling. The colt didn't flinch. He let Ethan inspect the limb, his breath shuddering from pain. I can't fix this out here, Ethan murmured. He needs medical attention, a splint, antibiotics. Travis looked uncertain. You're thinking of capturing him? No, Ethan said firmly. I'm thinking of helping him and letting him go. And then, something remarkable happened. The entire herd, Phantom included, stepped back, forming a clear path out of the gulch. It was a gesture Ethan didn't miss. They're trusting you, Travis said, stunned. No, Ethan said quietly. They're trusting me again. Together, the two men carefully secured the colt using a sling rigged to Boone's saddle. It was slow, tense work, but the herd didn't interfere. Phantom stood at the top of the ridge, watching. As Ethan turned back for one last look, Phantom dipped his head. It wasn't a goodbye, it was a promise. The sky above Blackstone Ridge burned with the colors of dawn, rose, amber, and the faintest tint of silver that reminded Ethan of Phantom's coat. Inside the recovery barn at the base of the ranger station, the injured yearling rested quietly on a bed of hay. His leg was wrapped in a makeshift splint, and an IV bag hung nearby, swaying gently with the breeze from the cracked window. Ethan leaned against the doorway, sipping black coffee, his casted leg resting on a stool. The colt had made it through the night. That alone felt like a small miracle. Behind him, Travis's voice cut the silence. I never thought I'd see wild Mustangs stand still long enough for a man to take one away without a fight. That stallion of yours, he's something else. Ethan didn't answer right away. His gaze remained fixed on the colt. They didn't give him up, he finally said. They sent him to me, like they knew I'd help. Travis stepped up beside him. And now what? You fix him up and release him, just like that? That's the plan. Travis scratched his chin. Hell of a plan. Before Ethan could reply, Nora entered the barn with a tablet in hand, frowning. I've got news, and it's not good. Ethan turned. What kind of news? 4 separate sightings, she said. 2 hikers, 1 ATV driver, and a drone operator, all reported seeing the herd. Word's spreading, people are curious. Ethan tensed. Curious how? Curious enough to attract attention. I'm talking bloggers, wildlife photographers, maybe even poachers. That silver stallion's practically a legend now. People are calling him the ghost of Blackstone. Travis groaned. That's all we need. Idiots chasing fairy tales through the woods. But Nora didn't laugh. She looked worried. If someone tries to capture Phantom or any of those horses, it could end badly. We need a plan, fast. Later that day, Ethan stood outside the barn, staring up at the ridge. His mind churned with everything Nora had said. She wasn't wrong. The world was starting to take notice, and that never ended well for wild animals. He remembered a story from years back, about a famous grizzly that had once saved a kid in a freak landslide in Montana. The media blew it up. Within weeks, hunters flooded the region. That bear never stood a chance. He wasn't going to let that happen here. Not to Phantom, not to the herd. The next morning, Ethan sat with a yellow legal pad on the porch, one leg elevated, a pencil tucked behind his ear, and a stubborn crease in his brow. Travis and Nora sat opposite him. "So, let me get this straight," Nora said, crossing her arms. "You want to designate Phantom and his herd as a protected micro-herd under the Regional Wildlife Trust?" Ethan nodded. "Yes. We create a buffer zone across their roaming area, fence it with trail cameras, and file for special protections. No interference, no tourism, no media access." "And you think the state's gonna go for that?" Travis asked, raising a brow. "They will," Ethan said, "because I'll give them something in return." Nora leaned forward. "Like what?" "A documentary. Full access to my recovery, to the rescue of the colt. We show what this herd did, how intelligent they are, how they cooperate, how they've lived in harmony with this land longer than any of us. If we show them not as myths, but as living proof of something ancient and good, people will back off." There was silence. Then Travis grinned. "Damn, you're really going full tree hugger on us, huh?" Ethan smiled. "Call it whatever you want. I just want them safe." That evening, Ethan limped down the narrow trail toward the clearing where the herd had last appeared. This time, he came alone. The sun was setting. Cicadas buzzed in the warm air, and the scent of pine filled his lungs. He didn't call for them. He just waited. Minutes passed. The wind stirred. Then, movement. Phantom stepped from the trees like a ghost from a forgotten dream. Behind him came the chestnut mare, then the rest of the herd, all watching Ethan with quiet intensity. He took a breath and unzipped the small satchel slung across his chest. Inside was a GPS tracker and a soft leather neckband, specially designed not to interfere with movement. Ethan held it out. "I'm not here to tag you. I'm here to protect you, if you'll let me." Phantom didn't move. Then, slowly, he stepped forward. One step, then another. Ethan's breath caught. When Phantom stopped just a few feet away, Ethan reached out, slow, steady. The stallion didn't flinch as Ethan slipped the band over his neck and fastened it. "There," Ethan whispered. "You're part of the story now. No one's going to hurt you again." Phantom snorted softly, a puff of warm breath brushing Ethan's hand. Then he turned and disappeared into the trees. Ethan didn't follow. He didn't need to. For the first time in weeks, something inside him felt settled. Back at the barn, the colt nickered softly as Ethan approached. His recovery had gone better than expected, and by the look in his eyes he was itching to return to the wild. "Soon," Ethan said, crouching beside him. "You'll go home soon." He looked toward the mountains. They're waiting. The thaw of early spring whispered through Blackstone Ridge with a scent of renewal and change. The mountain streams that had frozen solid in winter now trickled freely again, and the trees, still bare, rustled with the promise of green. Yet Ethan Carter felt no lightness in his chest. Not yet, not until the colt, Ember, returned to the wild and lived. Inside the barn, Ember was restless. His body had healed, the once broken leg now sturdy and strong beneath him. But something deeper churned in him, an ancient call, a pull that the stall walls couldn't contain. Ethan stood beside the yearling, brushing his flank slowly. "I know, buddy. It's time." Ember let out a sharp snort, tossing his head. From the doorway, Travis leaned in. "You sure he's ready? We could track the herd again, guide him closer before we let him loose." Ethan shook his head. "He doesn't need our help. They'll find each other." Nora stepped in, arms crossed, eyes trained on Ethan. "And what about you? You're walking fine, but you haven't been the same since that night in the ravine." He didn't answer. Instead, he reached for the leather halter and opened the barn gate. "Let's take him home." The truck rumbled up the narrow road toward the upper ridge, near where Phantom had first saved Ethan. They'd chosen this location carefully, far from trails, far from cameras. It was remote, exposed, but natural, and if Phantom's herd was near, they'd find Ember. Ember shifted nervously in the trailer, stopping once, twice. Ethan leaned on the trailer door. "Easy, you're almost there." When they arrived, the team moved fast. They set up a small perimeter with low rope and stepped back. Travis unlocked the trailer. Ethan approached the ramp slowly and opened the latch. The moment the gate swung wide, Ember exploded out with a triumphant, unrestrained charge. He cleared the rope line in a blur, mane flying, legs stretched. For the first time since the injury, he ran free. Nora grinned. "Look at him go." Ethan stepped forward, eyes fixed on the ridge. They waited. 10 minutes passed, then 15, then out of the trees. Movement. First a flash of silver, then a chestnut, then more. Phantom emerged, proud and calm, head held high. Ember froze mid-stride, nostrils flaring. He called once, a high, shrill whinny. The response came instantly. Phantom charged toward him, not with aggression but with recognition. Ember waited, trembling before darting to meet him. Their bodies collided, not violently but with power, noses brushing, then circling, rearing in rhythm. "They remember," Ethan whispered. "He's one of them." The rest of the herd gathered, surrounding Ember, nudging him, welcoming him. The reunion wasn't silent. It was wild, noisy, full of snorts and hoofbeats. But it was real, undeniable. That night, back at the station, Ethan sat alone in his cabin. His leg throbbed, but he ignored it. A laptop sat open in front of him, a blinking cursor on a blank page. Title, "The Ones Who Stayed." He paused, then typed. "I was broken when they found me. Not just my leg, but something deeper. Something I hadn't even realized was missing. I'd spent years tracking wild things, studying them, naming them, protecting them, but I never really saw them." He paused, until one stood between me and death. A knock broke the silence. Nora. "You up for a drive?" she asked. Someone triggered a motion camera, North Ravine. Ethan hesitated, then grabbed his jacket. "Let's go." The truck crept along the forest line. They parked at the base of the ridge and hiked on foot. It wasn't long before they saw it. Hoof prints. Fresh. They followed the trail until it split around a rocky outcrop. Suddenly, a loud, sharp cry echoed through the trees. Ethan froze. It wasn't Phantom, it was Ember, and it was a cry of pain. Ethan took off running, limping slightly, adrenaline surging. He cleared the trees and stumbled upon a horrific scene. Ember tangled in wire, a hidden illegal snare trap set by poachers. "No!" Ethan dropped to his knees, heart pounding. Ember thrashed wildly, eyes wide with panic. "Easy, buddy, I've got you." Nora radioed for backup. Travis responded instantly, racing back with wire cutters. It took 10 long, brutal minutes, but they freed him. Bloodied, shaking, but alive. Travis cursed. "They're setting traps up here now." Ethan's voice was low, furious. "They came because of the legend. They came for him." He turned to Nora. "We need to go public, now. Not just with Phantom, but with what's happening out here." Within a week, footage of the rescue aired across conservation networks. Not dramatic, not overproduced, just truth. It sparked outrage and action. Fines were issued, trails were closed. Protective legislation passed within weeks. A perimeter was enforced with drones and sensors. But Ethan didn't stop there. He launched a foundation, Guardians of the Ridge, with Nora and Travis as partners. a quiet sanctuary, not for tourists, but for wildlife to live, untouched. Months later, Ethan returned to the ridge alone. He didn't bring gear, just a flask of coffee, a blanket, and his thoughts. As the sun dipped, a flicker of silver caught his eye. Phantom. And beside him, Ember, fully grown now, no longer limping, strong. They stood watching him. He raised a hand slowly, no movement. Then Phantom dipped his head. Ember followed, then they turned, fading into the forest. And Ethan smiled, because he didn't need a photo to remember. He already knew what they looked like. Wild, free, and home.